Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Aaron and I am the Weekend Modder. This is an original launch model Xbox 360. It does not have an HDMI port. That makes this a Xenon motherboard. And we are going to perform the original JTAG hack against this console. So as you can see, I've just booted it up, right? It's starting up. So as I switch to my television here in front of me, check this out, AV. It is the original launch Blades dashboard. So look at that. Nice swoosh sound. And this is dashboard version 6717, so before 7371. It's a very rare dashboard version. And we're going to go about performing the JTAG modification on this console. Hey guys, just want to give a quick shout out to our friend Shawn Wayne, who actually donated this original Xenon JTAGable console to us to make this video. Shawn, thanks a lot. And guys, check out his channel, which will be linked in the top of the video description. All right, so a quick bit on the tools that we're going to be using to do the JTAG modification on this original Xenon console. You're going to need a few things, so let's go through those to make sure that you've got everything. So we've got some solder here. This is 60-40 tin lead mix. We have this JTAG pack that off of the Weekend Modder store. But really all this is a couple of bits of heat shrink tubing and these 1N4148 diodes. These diodes are the important bit that you need to do the JTAG modification. We've got a fiberglass scratch pin. That helps take the coating off of the motherboard so that you can get better adhesion with your solder. This is an X-clamp opening tool. It's actually, this pointy end works really well for opening the Xbox 360 hard shell case. But this is if you want to go ahead and remove the X-clamps, which I recommend if you're working on a console of this age, that you also do that, and then replace the thermal paste on the console with fresh thermal paste so that you can get as long a life out of it as you can. Got a pair of high precision tweezers. These are just to help hold the wires in place as you're working on it and soldering on stuff. Some Chinese flex paste. This is just low cost Chinese flex paste. And then if you get it off of my store, it comes with a plunger to help push it out as well. And then I have some duplicate items here. This is a Nandex and this is a JR Programmer V2. You really only need one or the other of these. Both of these will allow you to read and write the NAND of your console to do what you need to do as far as getting Zell to boot. So it's an either or situation. My personal preference is the Nandex, so that's probably what I'll use. But literally the same set of wires. So this is the NAND wires that I've made a little bit more durable by soldering in some resistor legs on the end. But this NAND wire plugs into either of those devices, and this is what interacts with your console's NAND. Additionally, I have just some electrical tape that I've torn off in little bits, a USB stick. This will be critical once we get the thing JTAG'd and you want to move some software over to it. Having a USB to go between your console and your computer will be important. Got some little lengths of wire here. This is between 28 and 30 AWG wire, so it's not real thick stuff, but just a couple of little lengths of that we'll need. Pair of little snips so I can cut my wires and strip them, and then a console controller to interact with the console. So let's get started. Hey everybody, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that we have a full written tutorial to go along with the video tutorial that you are watching. So if you're interested, at weekendmodder.com, if you go into the guides drop down, there's this JTAG Xenon option. That'll bring you right to this same JTAG Xenon guide page that I work from in this video. I suggest the supplies you need, the modding, the generic supplies, the software that you require, and provide a high level of the process as well as a full detailed tutorial with images and additional information in line. So please check that out as you're watching this video if you want additional written or reference material. As far as software requirements, you're going to want a copy of JRunner with the latest available dashboard version installed and ready to use. So where I recommend that you pick that up is on YouTube. On my channel, there's a video titled Weekend Modder JRunner plus Extras download. And Blue Snow is kind enough to go ahead and pop a 17559, which as of the making of this video, February 2nd, 2020, is the most recent version of the Microsoft dashboard, and that does work in that download link that he provides there. So go ahead and snag that, download, get it all installed, and get JRunner up and running. Alright, so starting in on the modification, as you can see, I've clearly removed the entire casing and all of the fans and shrouds from the motherboard. I don't really feel like it's necessary for me to do a tutorial on how to do that. It's pretty straightforward. There's lots of other videos out there that do. What we're going to be doing first is connecting up to the NAND headers to read the NAND, and the two headers that we're going to use are these J1, D2, and this other big sideways header here. So let's get in on close on those, and they actually have a coating on the top of them that would mess with our ability to solder to them. That's where that flux pin and fiberglass scratch pin come in later. Those are really going to increase your ability to get a good connection to these. So starting with the fiberglass scratch pin here, if I just move that back a little bit, if I go ahead and work that over the top of these connections for just a few moments, you should notice that the pads are getting notably shinier, right? We're removing kind of any coating that was on top of there. We're also going to do the same on the J1D2 header, and that's this one here. There we go. All right, from there, what we can do is go ahead and apply some flux paste. So again, I just used that little flux paste that we showed in the supply stuff earlier, and just put me a little dab of flux right across each of the headers. And referencing the FAT install diagram, which you can actually pull up right inside of JRunner. Go to Images, you go NANDX FAT install, it brings up this nice big picture viewer. There we go. Now we get it just nice and full screen. So those are the 7 wires that are necessary to read and write the NAND. So the way that I think about this when I count over is just looking at the diagram, and it's 1, 2, 3, third one over, right? So I'm just melting the flux paste a little bit. I'm just going to hold the tip of my iron right on top of that pad until I get a little bit of liquid response from the solder. And then as I do that, in this case I'm rotating the iron to put that ball of solder over the pad, because what I want is to actually just leave like a nice little shiny ball just right on top of that pad. Now, with the nice little shiny solder balls, you can tell how much different it is there, right? Then now you can really see it. See how that's just nice and got those little beads on there? That's exactly what you want to see. All right, so let's come down to this one. There we go. This one's a little less pretty, but we got solder in each one of those little slots. All right, so because I cleaned it off to show you, I'm going to need a little bit more solder flux in each one of those. And then we have our NANDX wires, right? So we'll just follow the normal install diagram. Okay, red. All right. And the top two again. Blue. And green. All right, with those wires now in place, we should have the connections necessary to go ahead and read our NAND. So what we need to do in order to do that is actually apply standby power to the console. So this is a plugged in power supply, but obviously I'm not turning the console on. I'm not pressing the power button. Actually don't even have the power button installed up here, right? And then we can go ahead and plug that NAND header into either our NANDX or our JR programmer. In this case, I'm using a NANDX. And then we can pop over into JRunner. And from here, we just want to make sure we see our NANDX logo, that we've got our number of reads configured for what we want. And we should be able to hit the read NAND button. Another thing you can do here is hit this little query button off to the side of the motherboard type. And that'll just kind of double check that the flash config that's being seen by the reader writer is matching with your expectations. So mine shows a CB version of 1903 and that this is a Xenon motherboard. So I'm going to go ahead and hit read NAND. And this will take about, 2-3 minutes per read. So this will take a little while to get through that. A couple of bad blocks in here would be normal. If you saw bad blocks at the end, what you just want to see is something that says bad blocks remapped successfully, as long as you see that. But we'll go ahead and let these reads run their course. All right, so in this particular case, you can see we didn't have any bad block messages in here, but the final message, even if you did see a bad block in here and you got that bad blocks remaps successfully, this is also another thing you want to make sure you see. You can say NANDs are the same. Another quick tip here is that if you hit the show working folder, what it will do is open up the folder on your computer where it's stored those NAND dump files. Great idea to grab those, copy them, paste them off somewhere else outside of that folder. JRunner uses this as its working folder, so it will take liberties like overwriting the files, deleting the files, yada yada. You really want to save these original NAND dumps. These are the NAND dumps that have your console retail at the dashboard that it's at. So they're like your recovery backup method. You flash this back, you remove any of the solder stuff you do, you can get back to retail. So hang on to those, it'd be a good idea. So now that we've completed step 3, reading the original NANDs, and we got our NANDs with the same message, we'll go ahead and write the Zell reloaded binary to the console. So we'll do that. So here's how this should look. You got your original NAND dumps all loaded up here. You've got your target dashboard version, you're a Xenon selected. So you can go ahead and hit create Zell reloaded. What you should see here is this Zell file created successfully, which is great. That's exactly what we want to see. Then what we're going to do is actually pop out to the console. We're going to need to reattach standby power. So that's what I'm doing here. And then go ahead and attach our NANDX or JR programmer, and then we can come back to JRunner and go ahead and hit write Zell reloaded. And this should take much less time than either of the reads. This only does the first 50 or so blocks, whereas the other ones do the whole thing. So just that fast, 8-10 seconds later, we've successfully written Zell reloaded. So we just completed step 4, write Zell to the console. So now it's on to time to go ahead and install the image or install the diodes. So these two represent the diodes, with the lines on the diodes being represented by this, and then the little red represents the little jumper wire you need to make between those two spots. So that will be the next segment that we go ahead and start working on. In my opinion, based on how this console fits into this metal casing, these next steps are easier to do with the motherboard outside of the housing entirely. Just be cautious when you're doing this here, because the thing is a bit more fragile without the little frame around it. So the area or areas that we're concerned about here, going back to that reference diagram, are these group of headers right here, and then these set right here. So just like we did with the headers that we soldered to read and write the NAND, we'll go ahead and use the fiberglass pen to make these a bit more shiny. Now, don't just keep going based on the amount of time that I'm doing this. Look for the results here, because different fiberglass scratch pens are going to be progress or sand down at a different rate. Mine's pretty well worn and kind of full of debris, so it takes a little while. But notice how much shinier that is than that. It's a lot more going to stick better when it comes to solder. And then I think it's the middle two of these, but I usually just kind of do this whole row. Now these are through hole already, so they don't have solder in the center of them. That's okay, but you can see how the little ring around there is actually brighter. So the metal is shiny and exposed that way. So that has prepared those, so now we can go ahead and put a tiny bit of flux around. It shouldn't be a huge deal, so just a bit of flux there, a bit of flux on this one. And usually the way I like to do it is to do the little jumper first. So we are going to connect from this furthest back point over, and then up skip one, and then to the next one here. So right now my flux paste is in the way, but just to reference you back to the desktop, the scene here. So that's the connection that we're making right here, this little guy. So now each of those spots that we're going to solder to has a nice little bit of solder on it. So let me go ahead and prepare a wire here to be that little jumper. And then so now what I usually do is just lay the wire hanging off the edge there. So that little bit of exposed stranded wire, I just want to soak it with some solder. This is called tinning a wire. So we're tinning it. And then the other side's already actually pre-tinned, but I'm just going to be aggressive and over solder it and tin it again. So now it's got a nice blob of solder on both ends. Now if you get too much like this, I feel like that's a lot of exposed end. You can just kind of trim it again, start over, no big deal. So I'm just going to trim off that big blob. Alright, so right back into the console, right? This is where those tweezers come in handy, man. I'm telling you, tweezers are a win when it comes to this kind of work. So what I'll do is I'll position my wire here, hold it with my tweezers in a way that's going to make it easy to route in and get connected where I need it to go. And of course this is made doubly hard by having a camera right in there. I need to rotate this a little bit. Alright. So I push it down. And there we go. Now I can grab the other end with the tweezers and kind of pull on it to route it how I want it to go. Right? And then that end needs to jump to this little pad. No big deal, right? So there is our jumper. There's our jumper from back to that pad. Now, each of these will get connected with the diode in line, but those we're going to take a few minutes to prepare in advance. So let's do that. So with those, I like to kind of be true to the image that we're referencing. So I got a blue and a yellow wire, right? Just like the reference image that we're going off of, right? So if I go back to here, we've got a blue wire and a yellow wire. We'll just keep it real nice and simple. So the reason I still have the console here is because I actually want to give you an idea of like the length of what's playing in here, right? So where we're going from is right there, right, lengthwise over to about here. But we also have a diode that needs to be in here with this blue wire. So if we were to cut this length and then add some length of diode to that, we would have way more than enough wire, right? Because we're going to add some length via that. So this is all the length of blue wire that I'm going to need. And then about the same sort of thing, right? To yay with that. So we'll clip those out. Right, so now that we've got those roughly measured, what we can do is get out the diodes themselves. If you bought the JTAG pack from Weekend Modder, then you got 3, just an extra, just cuz. If you ordered your own diodes, you probably got a pack of 50 of them for a couple of bucks on eBay, no problem. And then this is just heat shrink tubing, you know, for the thing. So what we need to do here is put these 2 diodes in line with those wires, and then make sure you can see how on the diodes themselves there's like that black line on the end of them near my thumb. If you look at the diagram, that black line is represented by this little guy right here, right? So in the way that that black line is on the side of this connection, we want that black line to be on the side in real world when we hook this up. So I'm going to spend just a few moments, and what I'm going to do is cut off some of the excess on each of these legs and kind of splice on a little bit of wire before and after, and then I'll cover that with the heat shrink tubing, and that will give me my little wire that I'm going to connect up. All right, sorry about that. I think my camera blipped out there for a minute. There we go. Okay, so now that we've got those both done with the diodes aligned to the left, right, we can go ahead and slide on a little bit of heat shrink tubing to kind of cover it up, pretty it up, you know, whatever you want to call that. There we go. All right, now we have the 2 wires that we need with the diodes in line. We can go ahead and get them installed in our console. All right, so I've got the console rotated 90 degrees from what you were used to seeing it as, but points are still the same. So we'll go ahead and solder to the two middle. So those are the two spots. Again, that's right here that we're going to. And to make it nice and easy, we kept the wire lengths and everything the same. So we have our yellow wire, and we're paying attention to our orientation. That's going to go to the lower one here. All right, so these are connected now, and we know we've got our orientation right. So now it'll actually be a little easier if we rotate the board back again. Yellow wire is going on the left, the blue wire on the right. So we want to be real careful when we strip this. All right. Yellow, blue. All right, so now we have got our JTAG wiring installed. What we expect to happen at this point is that we should be able to put the console back into its case. And when we boot it, we should see Zell on screen. So let's go ahead and put this thing a little bit back together. You're going to want the fan, right? Because while you've got Zell booted and running, you don't want to cook your console. And yes, you should even put the fan shroud back. All right, now that we have the console totally modded, essentially, right? We've got the NAND written with the Zell files. We've got the JTAG wiring installed, the two diodes and the jumper wire. What we should be able to expect at this point is that booting the console should result in Zell and us getting our CPU key. So here goes. If I had an Ethernet cable attached, I would do it now before I boot it. And this is a really good sign here because by having the Ethernet cable attached, that would get me my CPU key without having to manually type it in. So right now what it's doing, requesting DHCP, is it's trying to find the IP address so that it can offer me the CPU key over IP rather than having to manually type it in. But unfortunately, with my current setup, the easiest thing for me to do right now is actually just snap a picture of the CPU key, like this, and then just type it into JRunner. So that's what I'm going to do, and we're going to switch this thing back to my monitor setting. So we can go ahead and power off the console. We don't need Zell, really, for anything like that. But what we are going to need to do is pop into JRunner itself and enter that CPU key. So you can still see our NAND dumps loaded. That CPU key is the critical bit that we need here. So let's go for it. CO6F600B. Did you guys get to watch me type that in? So I typed this in. We got the initializing, right? We got CPU key is correct. It adds it to the database. And then, as I said, I've never done the serial number, but here it is. It decrypted it. So if you actually look in this KV info block, now I can actually see my DVD key. Tells me information about what DVD drive was in the console, the serial number of the console, all this cool stuff, right? The point of what we're trying to do here today, though, is to create an XE build image. So again, right now, we still have the NAND dump 1 bin loaded, but when we create XE build loaded, or XE buildage, it's going to update that. So here's a warning, SMC bin found, delete it. Unless you put it there, delete it. So the wording on this dialog is really confusing. Bottom line is, SMC bin found, delete it, question. This is the question you're answering. Do you want to delete it? And then this is advice. This is the statement. Unless you put it there, delete it. Well, I didn't go through some special process of putting it there, right? So I didn't put it there, so I should delete it. So yes, SMC bin found, delete it. Yes, I want to delete it. So down here, it should take a few moments. You should see some text scroll by. You should see that you've got the build type of JTAG. It highlights your console as a Xenon, provides your CPU and DVD keys. But here's the thing, initializing UPD flash.bin. Now, check it out, in this load source, now what's my source file? UPD flash.bin. This is my modified NAND file. If I hit that show working folder again, in my show working folder, there is my NAND dump originals, and then here's my UPD flash.bin. And notice it's the same size. So this is the hacked. Here's my 2 retail copies, and then here's the hacked copy that we made, right? So what we want to do now is write that to the console. So actually kind of back out to where we were. So we need to reapply standby power, and then actually we can reconnect our NAND read-write device. And in the NAND read-write device connected, we can go back and select write the NAND. And what are we writing? We're writing the UPD flash.bin. So this will take roughly as long as the full NAND reads did. All right, so that NAND image completed. We got that done. Disconnect our NAND reader writer. I like to briefly disconnect power before I try to boot a console after rewriting its NAND. Just a habit I picked up. And so now what we expect to have happen is when I boot the console, it should blink and boot normally. And it should actually arrive at what looks like a standard retail dashboard. All right, so again, what we expect to happen is an apparent retail boot here. So here we go. There we go, indications on the LED. And then if we go ahead and hit the AV input here, look at that. Looks pretty retail-ish to me. And on a way newer dashboard version than the last time we saw this console run one. So here we are on dashboard 17559, and we are JTAG successfully. So we'll do a little brief thing about firing up Xcx menu. All right, so here's the proof. Despite that default look, if I go under My Games, I've plugged in my USB stick that has Xcx menu loaded on it, and I am successfully able to launch Xex menu. There we are. So we've got other stuff on this USB stick that you can see here, but this console is successfully JTAG'd. There it is, ladies and gentlemen.